I got you, my friend. Yeah. Thank I bet it is.
All right, thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and get started again. The goal here is to, by the way, first of all, the winery closed the place at 7 o'clock, and they keep this place open for 2 hours for us. So I want to thank the owner of the facility to allow us to do that. So a round of applause for them. So I'm going to put Greg on the spot for 1 minute since he's right here. The reason why we're doing this and the money that we're collecting here, or we collected, it goes toward a PAC. And so I want Greg to mention about the purpose of the PAC, where the money is going, what we're going to do in the future, and what events that we could have. So with that, Greg, come on up. A round of applause for Greg Walker.
Thanks, buddy. Paybacks are coming. So basically, the PAC that we're raising money for is called the Founding Principles of Liberty PAC. The whole purpose of the PAC is events like this to let people understand what the founding principles are, hopefully to, as people come into the country, to, you know, let them know what the dream is and, you know, help them out in achieving it, and to elect officials who back the founding principles of liberty. So thank you for coming out.
Okay, before I forget, because I do forget from time to time, because I do listen to the stories and I get totally engrossed into it. But we have an author in the audience, and she will be speaking later tonight, and she's sitting right behind me here. But she does sell a book that tells her story of fighting against, and I'll keep it a secret so she can expand more. But she has a more extended version in a book here, so please support her. In fact, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, 50% of the proceed will go toward the PAC. Right? So please support her, support the PAC, support Greg, and we'll get more candidates moving forward. So a round of applause for Ms. Rita, please. And without further ado, I'm going to turn back to the third speaker.
Good evening. Thank you for the founder and principal of Liberty PAC for hosting this event. It's very significant for us. Shares our story. My name is Johan Perez, and I am a political refugee from Venezuela. Unfortunately, communism does not belong to the past. My story is more recently. I'm speaking to you today because socialism is the biggest scam that we'll ever know. Socialism is a poison that once you take it, there is no turning back. In my family, we know very well the consequence about socialism. First, my father. He fled from Spain to Venezuela as a child in the 60s. And then, in 2008, I fled from Venezuela to America. Due to political persecution, along with my wife and my 1-year-old son. I left behind my parents, my family, my church, my career, and my friends. In 1988, I was a law student in Venezuela. I was full of dreams for a better future for my family, my country, and myself. At that time, the country was under social and political unrest. There were continuous riots and looting. on the principal cities in Venezuela. Back then, Hugo Chavez was ranked first in the polls, promising social justice, equal reform, free education, free health care. Does this sound familiar to you? In 2005, I started working as an attorney for SUMATE, a non-profit organization focused on defending freedom and protecting free exercise of political rights. In 2006, I, on behalf of SUMATE, exposed Hugo Chavez's scheme to elude a transparent electoral process before the General Assembly of the Organization of American States, OAS. For that moment on, Hugo Chavez began to persecute my organization because controlled electoral process has been a key element for remaining power. Then Chavez, and now Nicolas Maduro. Let me tell you, as President Trump has said many times, back then Venezuela was the best country to do businesses in Latin America, rich in natural resources. Venezuela has the largest oil reserve on the planet. Sadly, people in Venezuela from the conservative side were thinking that we're not Cuba. And socialism is not going to happen to us. Back then, Venezuela was full of Cuban immigrants who alert us of the dangers of socialism. And from the liberal side, they believe those empty promises. And the result, the left won the election. Let me tell you how the future looks like if President Trump will not win this election. After the left took the political power in Venezuela, the transformation of the country was a matter of time. Through the Supreme Court judges who legislated new rules and did not interpret the Constitution as it was written, Chavez was able to reform the Constitution, destroying each of the individual freedom. For example, they did not go house by house taking the guns. They did two things. First, they invalidate all permits to carry guns, which until today you can go to jail for carrying your own guns. And second, the government assumed the monopoly of all weapon ammunition, thereby eliminating all private dealers. After the population was disarmed, they imposed the concert culture to intimidate everyone. And they also took control of the electoral process. Let me tell you that an election has been scheduled for this coming December in Venezuela, because it's not a problem for them to hold elections when they have already established a fraud mechanism to win all of them. We have 21 years and counting of socialism in Venezuela. And the result is more chaos, more division, more poverty, more death. If socialism took place in America, the most vulnerable communities, Black community, Hispanic community, will be the most affected. Please don't think that socialism won't happen here in America. They only need three things to transform America. First, control the electoral process. Second, chief the Supreme Court. And third, through the Supreme Court, began to legislate new rules to restrict our freedom. For me, American history is a passion. I love American history. Our founder father did not conceive the permanence of our political system without the character of the citizen. Citizens who defend our freedom on a daily basis. It is not the sole responsibility of the Republican Party to ensure the integrity of this election. We must give President Trump a landslide victory that included the state of Virginia. We need it. We must, as a citizen, be vigilant of our electoral process, more now than ever. Fighting communism is not a political battle, it's a cultural battle. We must speak to liberals and minorities about the danger of socialism and how socialism affects them. We have to raise up a new generation that change the narrative of the media, in the entertainment industry, in the educational system. Giving Trump 4 more years in office is just the beginning to have more strong families, strong communities, strong free markets, more school choices, more churches, more American flag that stand for freedom, and not a Leviathan state. Because America is the last bastion of liberty. Let me tell you, America is the last hope of humanity. I'm from a country that is far 3 hours of flight from here. And there's no other place to go. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for this invitation to this beautiful place. Very nice countryside here. My name is Mauricio Tamargo. I am born in Cuba. I left Cuba when I was 4 years old. I am what they call a Peter Pan political refugee. Means that I left as an unaccompanied minor from Cuba. It was a system set up at the time, 1961, between the Catholic Church and the federal government to help people, political refugees, leave Cuba. I was, me and my younger brother, I was one of 5 children, and I was handed at the airport to somebody who was flying to Miami with a note on my shirt, pinned to my shirt saying, when I arrive, please call so-and-so at this phone number, which was my aunt who was already in Miami. The Cuban Revolution happened on New Year's Eve on 1959, and my uncle was into politics, and he went into hiding that same night when Batista left the country. And he, most of my family was not political. Most of Cuba, the Cuban people were not political. They were, my family was farmers. We lived our lives between Havana and Holguin, which is on the eastern end of the island, and Havana's on the western end. And so we were not they were not involved in politics. I was 4 years old. So the revolution happened, and people said, "Oh, it's just another revolution." You know, we've had, well, not a revolution, but they've been little coups over Cuba's history, and at the time it was going to be another coup. So we didn't think much of it, and it'll sort itself out in a few months, and everything will be back to normal. but it didn't go back to normal. And I explained to my fellow Americans that that is why the Cubans here are so political, because we neglected our responsibilities in Cuba and we lost the country. And we are not going to lose another one. So, we are, as you all know, Cubans have a reputation. We're very political, and you know, the other side doesn't like us because Gore made the mistake of picking Florida for his recount fight. Because we're not the pussycats. We stand up and fight. So my dad was the youngest of 7 children, and he refused to leave when the communists took over and they started taking land. And all his siblings took off, and he was going to make a stand for it, and they kept coming for parts of the farm, and he kept saying, accommodating it, but he thought he could, you know, prevail over them. And then the communists, let me tell you, you don't know who you're dealing with when you're dealing with communists. Well, first of all, the communists aren't communists. They're just a gang of thugs. They don't believe in anything. They will do and say anything. They are so ruthless. They will kill whatever they have to kill, or who they have to kill. They don't care. So the Cubans resisted in Cuba when they became clear that these were communists. And you know, a lot of times in Latin America, it's a team effort that they use to take over the government, but then one in the team is the real power, and he, one by one, eliminates the rest of the team, and that's what Fidel did. And they play little games to undercut the opposition. One little game, and this shows the character of the communist regime. And I see signs of it already being used here. They announced that they will be taking people's children away from them. And they're going to be sent to re-education camps. That was like a bomb going off. And it triggered a panic because they have done so many awful things already at that point. So they believe that this is going to happen. And you know, everybody thinks that the Cubans came here because they took our property away. That's not why the Cubans came here. They came here because they threatened to take the children away. And that set off a chain reaction. That's what set off Peter Pan, children. And they started getting the kids out, especially the boys, because the boys were going to be part of the military, going to be the laborers in the field and all that. That's why my family got me and my brothers out, and then my older brother, and no, actually my older brother got out first, and then me and my younger brother. And all the children were sent out before the parents, our parents. And this was the story for almost all the Cubans. Everybody got out this way. And then the lucky ones reassembled here in America. But some it took years for the rest of their family to get out. My family all got out within 3 or 4 months period of time. And my dad was the last to leave with my baby sister. And he had an illegal plane to get out because there was no getting out otherwise. So him and some other people combined their resources to hire an illegal pilot and an illegal plane and flew out through some, small runway in the middle of nowhere and get out to Miami. So when we got here, we were the Catholic sponsor, I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And the Cubans were scattered all over the U.S. through their Catholic sponsorship system. The Catholic sponsor we had, unluckily for us, I love Milwaukee, but it was freezing cold. and we were not prepared. They didn't tell us, hey, we're going, you need a coat. No, we arrived in the dead of winter without coats. So it was, Cubans are tropical people, so it was rough. But our sponsor were wonderful people. We remained close friends. When we left, my parents still thought we would be returning in a few months. We didn't bring anything. We were not able to bring anything. We just a shirt on our backs and one suitcase, but no money, no valuables. Many people left with valuables. Cubans are clever people. And they found ways to tape things to babies, in babies' diapers and all kinds of ways, but we did not. And the communists went about proceeding to destroy the country. You know, a few years ago, we sent, it's hard to explain this to an American. They don't know the communist system. It sounds like Shangri-La and Utopia. And but we send copies of Animal Farm, the movie, to all my nephews and nieces and friends, because it really explains it pretty well. It's all there if you want to see it. But the communists are very clever, and they find gullible people that believe that they can get something for nothing. And they prey on people's envy and jealousy, and the people fall for the same thing over and over again. When I left Cuba, I became political. I became involved in politics. I was Congresswoman Ileana Ross-Layton's chief of staff, and I helped the Nicaraguans when they were dealing with communism, when they got out, but they got suckered back in again. So, but I say to myself, how could the Nicaraguans fall for the same thing we fell for? They saw what happened to Cuba, and yet it happens again. They and I say to myself, how did the Venezuelans fall for the same thing? They saw what happened to Nicaragua and Cuba, and yet they fall for the same thing. And it makes no sense, but yet the communists know psychology very well, and they use it very effectively. The communist system, of course, we all know is never, it's unnatural. It never will prevail economically. It's a system designed to fail. It's really a scheme for power. It's nothing to do with economics. It's just power, get power, keep power. And the Cuban government is run by thugs. Thugs who have massive Swiss bank accounts. And all the resources that the people are receiving, they skim a lot off the top. The people are starving. And the Cuban hierarchy have fat Swiss bank accounts. In fact, the Castros hated it when Forbes listed him as one of the 100th richest people in the world. And he said, oh, that's not my money. I'm holding it for the Cuban people. But it's all a scam. It's not an economic system at all. It's just power. And they use it to get power and to keep power. And it started the same way it's happening here, I'm sorry to say. I don't want to scare anybody, but I guess I want to scare somebody. You know, there's a saying, a joke. Cubans have a great sense of humor. We're always making jokes. And there's a joke that says, Castro pretends to pay us and we pretend to work. Because the whole thing is a joke. There is nobody working. Nothing is working. Everything is a broken system. And the Cuban economy has up to now relied on the infrastructure left to them by their previous government. They have never, I mean, the water purification system in Havana has never been modernized or updated. It's falling apart right now. You cannot drink the water in Havana. You cannot drink the water anywhere in Cuba. They're now selling these in portable water filters. Everything, there's dengue fever everywhere. This medical system in Cuba is a joke. If you are sick and you go to the hospital, your family had better feed you, bring you sheets, change your clothes, and be at your bedside helping you. Because all the government, the hospital gives you is a bed and a roof, and that's it. There's no medicine, there's no anything. The doctor comes and he does what he can. He has no training, of course, but he is a doctor. And by the way, these medical brigades that they send all over the country, as a favor to whoever is dealing with COVID or medical problems, guess what is Cuba's #1 revenue source? More than tourism, more than mining, more than sugar, more than tobacco, it's these medical brigades. These medical brigades are the way Cuban government extracts money from all of these countries. And it's my theory that these countries are using our foreign aid to pay the Cubans for these doctors that are bogus doctors. It's all a money scheme. And that's all Cuba is a money scheme. So I could go on for hours and tell you about this. I'm a lawyer. I have a law firm in Old Town Alexandria, and I have started with my law partner, we've started a nonprofit called Global Liberty Alliance. It focuses on helping victims of human rights and rule of law in other countries. Right now we're focused on Cuba and Latin America, but we're going to be helping other countries to hopefully get back to democracy, get back to liberty, because it's horrendous, the suffering that people do. You know, when the communists took over Cuba and the U.S. were like this. They were brothers. They were very close. My family never traveled to America, but all the other Cubans, many of the other Cubans, they shop in New York, they shop in Miami, they spoke English. My parents did not speak English. When we arrived in Milwaukee, it was a shock. But, and Cuba's socioeconomic level was equal to the U.S. We were the leading economic power in Latin America, equal to the U.S. in everything. You know, when we arrived in Milwaukee and people said, Cuba, where's Cuba? And do you guys have air conditioning? And do you guys have electricity, television? Cuba had multiple TV networks. This is 1959. Cuba had, everything. It had everything the U.S. had, Cuba had. It was equal. And now look at it. It is in shambles. People are starving. There was a riot last week for food because there's no food. They get some frozen chicken from some country, and but there's no. Everything is rationed. It's always been rationed since the communists took over. And I see the way they took over, I see those tricks being used here in our political system today. The mobs in the street is just like one of the last things that happened before everything really got bad. That was, the next thing would be, rebels, organized military opposition, militias, trying to bring down our government. And this Antifa, they seem ridiculous, but that is what they're trying to do. It just, it seems at this point it's ridiculous, but you never know. I don't put anything past these people. The communists can do a lot with a small number of people. And right now, we need to re-elect Donald Trump. It is so important. And you know, from the moment he came down that escalator and started talking the way he talks, I said, oh my God, this guy, he gets it. He knows what's going on. You cannot twist yourself into a social, politically correct pretzel. You have to get ugly in their face, because that is the only thing they understand. You have to really stand up for yourself and don't let them play this head game on you about being politically correct. You have to fight in any way you can. And so I'll leave it at that for now. We need to get involved, get everybody involved, and make them understand what communism is. It is not a political system. It is a power game. I mean, it's not an economic system. It's just a political power grab. And they trick people into thinking that it's going to improve their lives. It's not going to improve their lives. It's going to destroy their lives. And by the way, the two enemies of the communist system are family and religion. Those are the natural enemies. That's why those two institutions are being attacked all the time, and mocked and ridiculed, and tried to weaken those two institutions, because if those two institutions stay strong, they will fail. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Before we move on to the next speakers, first of all, I apologize. I'm not doing a good job as an MC. And the problem is the story is so great, I had no hearts to kind of like, you know, move on to the next speakers. So we're running out of time. So I want to give the rest of the speakers to speak and have time, ample time to speak. But I also recognize some local politicians and candidates here as well. So if you're okay with that, I did ask for questions, but it looks like we won't have time for questions. And we do need to vacate the area right about 9 o'clock. So we have the speakers, and if you're okay with this, speakers here, and then we're going to ask the candidates and politicians to come up and, you know, spend 2 minutes to talk about themselves. Okay? So I apologize for not having time for questions. All right. All right. So Wendy, you're next.
Hi there. My name is Wendy Mendez de la Torre. I am a very proud American of Cuban and Spanish descent, and I am married to another American of Cuban descent. I was lucky enough to be born in the United States. So I did not have to escape communism, but my parents did. And my grandparents had to twice. My story starts with my grandparents in Spain during the Franco era. It was a fascist government, a dictatorship. They fled to go to the beautiful sunny island of Cuba, thinking that that was going to be their dream, only to arrive there and a couple of decades later encounter a takeover of their government and a person who referred to himself as a proclaimed socialist, which we actually know what he is, Fidel Castro. So my family once again had to flee a dictatorship and an oppressive government. And they came over here, and luckily me and my siblings were born here, and my children have been blessed to be born here also. You've already heard a first-hand story of a child born in Cuba and who had to flee at 4 years old. And let me apologize to you, because maybe my country hadn't like birthed Castro, maybe Venezuela wouldn't be in the situation it's in. Seriously, I have a soft spot in my heart for Venezuela. I spent a summer there when I was in college, and it was in the 1980s a beautiful, beautiful country. I'm going to read you an essay. I write. I work for the federal government, but I write all day long. I love to write. So I wrote an essay, and this is based on my mother's story that I wanted to share with you. Imagine being an 11-year-old child and waking up on New Year's Day to find out that your president has been exiled and proclaimed socialist Fidel Castro has taken over. You hear the whispers and see the worried looks on the faces of your parents, grandparents, and their friends. Many of them have already fled a fascist Spanish government just a few decades before. Within a short time, your prestigious private school is taken over. Your school uniforms are changed, and your new school books praise the successes of Marxism. You and your classmates are tested, and you score within the top 1% of students in your country. Your parents are ecstatic. They think they've raised a genius. However, that is until they are informed that you have received a special scholarship to complete your secondary studies in Czechoslovakia. So yes, my mother was going to be taken from her parents and sent abroad. Out of fear, your parents pull you from school, citing your severe asthma as the reason. You spend the next 2 years in hiding, shuffling back and forth between relatives. This is the reason when I was 11 years old, my mother handed me a copy of the Diary of Anne Frank for me to read it, because during those 2 years that she was in hiding, this book became her best friend. Finally, your visa to the United States comes through, and at 13 years old, you flee the country that is your birthplace, a country you no longer recognize. You kiss your grandparents goodbye at the door, not realizing that you will never see them again, nor will you ever be present to bury them. Your mother drives you to the airport to kiss you goodbye and puts you on a plane with her sister and nephew. You do not realize you will not see your mother again for 25 years until you have teenagers of your own. In the meantime, your father has fled to the Dominican Republic after his soda company was seized by the government. Your sister has been arrested for handing out counter-revolutionary flyers on a street corner. She now lives in a convent. She was 17 at the time. She now lives in a convent to protect her and to smuggle her out of the country. Your future husband was already in the U.S. attending military school. This is my father, in case I've lost you. And at 17 years old, he would be left there on his own because his father was unable to leave. He would never see his father again. Your future second husband will be arrested when a counter-revolutionary meeting is raided, and he will spend 2 years in prison and tortured at the hands of the communists. However, your children will be born in freedom and will prosper and love their country. You will warn them to never take freedoms for granted. You will tell them that if this falls, there is nowhere else to go. As you've already heard, this is probably one of the most important elections we will see, both in Virginia and as a nation. We are losing our country. So all I can ask of you guys is be political. As you've heard, our people were not. And in the new world, for us, we had to become. So please get out and vote, and please make the right choices when voting. Thank you.
All right, so one quick announcement. First of all, I want to thank the Boyd's Nest to cater this event tonight. A round of applause for Boyd's Nest. It is 8:42 right now, so I'm going to ask, I would like Vincent to speak first, and I would like you to do last, right?
I promise you I'll do it in 5 minutes.
All right. All right, so go ahead, Vincent, why don't you start first? Right.
Why don't you sit here?
Yeah.
We'll put the man between the two ladies. Sure.
And how much it costs for the book?
I Whatever you want to say.
Oh, wow, okay, and name any price. So please make sure this is a great book, you can read one night. And we're also trying to raise fund. 50% of that goes toward the pack. Right?
$20.
$20 sold. Okay. Right. And where do we go for that? Where's the books? It's right back here, right? Please do that. Thank you so much. Now back to Vincent.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Vincent Palafingel. I ran for school board in Fairfax last year. I'm currently on the State Central Committee of Virginia Republican Party. So just like, what I heard from the speakers, I decided to become political for a reason. We have heard many stories about these countries, Cuba, Venezuela, Russia, China. You always hear, the revolution that happened in those countries. But when you look at the history of India, the best friend all these countries had was a guy named Jawaharlal Nehru. But he didn't have this bad name that these other leaders have, because he was a charmer. He came in through democracy, and it was called democratic socialism. And you are hearing that now. So you may think that if you are a democracy, you are safe. You are not. And I'm an example. I'm sitting here. That is the reason, because I was born in a democratic socialist country. So when you talk about India's history as a nation, we became independent in 1947. So if you look at the leaders, Mahatma Gandhi and Nehru, it's a big subject, but I'm just giving you some pointers here for you to understand, because a lot of Americans have nothing but respect for these leaders, like Gandhi and Nehru and all that. But I want you to understand the politics of their philosophy, and that is the reason why I thought I should come and speak, in spite of having a flat tire on the road. I took an Uber to come here with my wife. So the reason is, the most important thing I think that we have to understand is the experiments that they had in countries like India. That is what is going on here in the name of democratic socialism. It's a slow poison. You're getting heated in the water in a very slow fashion. So before you know it, you are in an irreversible situation of no going back anywhere. You are a socialist country. So a lot of people think it can never happen to America, but India is an example to show you that it can happen to a country like America, because it's a very slow process. It may not be violent initially, it may not be like Cuba, it may not be like Venezuela, it may not be like China, no Bolsheviks like Russia. But in India, if you look at the history of Indian independent movement, Mahatma Gandhi, in spite of all his flaws, he believed in decentralization of power. But he handed over the baton to Jawaharlal Nehru. He believed in Soviet-style communism. And they came up with this thing called mixed economy, just to confuse the Indian society, which was very religious and very family-oriented. So it is not easy for them to have a big central control on a big country like India from Delhi. So they have to really play it in a nice way so that people accept it. We always hear that British was the reason for India being divided into India and Pakistan. But if you look into the history, British had a plan which was more of a decentralized plan. It was called Cabinet Mission Plan that was presented to India. But Nehru was personally responsible for scuttling that idea and going with a division model so that he can have a Hindu India with complete control from Delhi. And when you talk about India, the diversity of India, you have to understand, we are not just diverse like, Hispanics and, Mexicans and Cubans. We are not diverse like people from New York to Texas. We are much more diverse than English and French. If you cross the border to another state, you don't speak that language, you don't understand that culture, you're totally different. And that's a country which is supposed to be a continent that they made a single unified centrist control place And that is the failure that became the reason for India being a very, very poor country in spite of having these very popular leaders until 1991. So we started with the Soviet socialist model with central air plants and everything. And if you look at industries, everything was government owned. Everything was government started. All the hydrothermal plants, car industry. If you want to get a car, you had to be 4 hours in line to get a new car. So that's why 6-year-old car, second-hand car, will cost you more money than a new car. And Bajaj Scooter, you might have heard about that scooter company. They were penalized and prosecuted once for producing more scooters than what they are allowed to. You heard about license Raj, red tape. India is a typical example of all that. And that's all of that coming together. And in 1991, they had no other option other than to open up. That's called economic reforms of 1991. And it was never presented to the people that we are now changing our system because our system doesn't work. It was kind of something that was forced upon the government by people who were lending the government money, the banks and the financiers all around the world. So in 1991, we had the economic reform. Just in one day, our currency was devalued 18%. And you had to experience these things. When I'm talking about this, I have experienced this. This is the first month's salary right after first month's salary that I sent from my Saudi Arabian job to India to pay off a small loan that I had. The next day, the currency is devalued by 18%. So these are personal. And I have stood in lines to get rice, kerosene, sugar, palm oil, cooking oil. In lines that you have to start standing in line at 12 noon for the shop that's going to open at 4 o'clock in the evening and still get very limited quantity of very low quality stuff. I still remember the radio that was sitting in my home. In my village where I was born, my father was the first person to get a transistor radio and it used to have a license tag. I used to ask my dad, what is that paper for? With some signature and stuff like that. It used to have a license tag. So, and from there, in 1991, we reformed, and now, because of that reform, because of capital flow, industry started becoming better, becoming privatized, and IT boom helped India to change its image. And even in that industry, there are efforts from politicians to bring in the unions and bring in labor movement so that you can really control that economy, that new economy that is really the thing that helped India to get out somehow out of the socialist clutches, even though the laws are still the same. So I was talking about India. Now, when I come to the state where I was born, Kerala, that's the first place in the world where Cambodians came to power through elections in 1957. And it was definitely, the Congress party was complacent. They really had no problem because they were pretty much the same philosophy. But the guy who came into power in 1957, he had a movement called the land reforms. And what he did, it took basically land from rich landowners to the people who were living there, who were leasing the land, who were working on those lands. They divided the land and gave them free land. The only place in the world where land ownership changed hands without bloodshed. Kerala, the only place where I am coming from. And people who live in a house, if they don't pay rent, the government says they can't be evicted. And you see the signs of that here. So, and it's a long story, and I know we have less time. So I want you to be open to learning more about the Indian experiment with democratic socialism. So if you hear democratic socialism, and you hear the horror stories of communism and socialism, and maybe democratic socialism is not that bad, it's equally bad, and plus it's very deceptive. It is not very evident. If there is a real revolution happening, we can at least fight back. Here you will not know what's coming, and then all of a sudden you lose it. And I graduated in 1991, right about the time the reforms are in place. And you have to be registered at the employment exchange and waiting for the very few government jobs. So I looked at the big lines of people waiting for this very limited number of jobs and looking at the student loan that I have, and people escape the country, go to other countries and send money back home. So 36% of the GDP of the state where I am coming from, coming from people like me who go to foreign lands and work and send money. It's mostly Middle East, Dubai and Saudi Arabia and all those countries. So all these communist comrades that we have in our place, they go there, they become silent and they start working in the Middle East. When Mauricio was telling about Castro, that Castro thinks that you are working and you're not working, and I can relate to that in the government offices in Kerala, where people don't really do anything. So basically they go to Middle East and they know that they cannot, of course because of autocracy there, and they start working. And once they start working, they have access to money and they send the money back home to build big houses and give the money for their sisters' weddings, and that's how that economy is sustaining. So this is a very pathetic model. Washington Post wrote, even recently, that when the COVID thing happened, the Kerala model, the most successful Kerala model. And they have no clue how that Kerala model is sustainable. So I don't want to take too much of the time, it's a big subject, so I want to put this subject in front of you for you to learn that this democratic socialist experiment in a place like India and a place like Kerala, it's a miserable failure, no matter what you hear in Washington Post or anywhere for that matter. And even Indian Americans don't know that. Do you know how I know this? The Cubans were talking about them being very political and very active, understanding what's going on. And I'm so proud to watch you guys when you do that. Same thing, Vietnamese community. They have seen this, the bloodshed. They know what is coming. But these Indian American people, I don't want to say this, but we are so stupid. 85% of the Indian Americans voted for Hillary Clinton in the last election. 85%. Without understanding what they are doing. Now, all of a sudden, because of Howdy Modi and Trump becoming close with Modi, there is a change of heart, and hopefully, this time, we are counting on at least 50% Indian Americans to vote for Trump. Yes. So, we are having changes, maybe not for the economic reasons, that would be nice for people to understand what exactly is going on, but at least because of a friendship that President Trump was able to strike with the Indian Prime Minister, people are now kind of supporting Trump way more than how much they supported in 2016. So that's what I wanted to tell you guys, and have a research mind and try to understand what exactly is going on in countries like India, where people have a lot of respect for those countries because of the history and even these leaders. But if we were successful, I don't have no reason. We have a huge country. I don't have no reason to immigrate and to come to America and sit in front of you to talk about socialism. So we are not a success. We are nothing close to success. We may not be as, having that bad reputation like other violent communist regimes, but it's equally bad. And be on guard. Let us all vote for President Trump in November and make sure that we give a befitting reply to these communist dummies who have lined up behind Biden. I don't want to say whatever I'm thinking about him, but this is a joke. This is really a joke. So please, let us make sure that we don't let any stone go unturned. Reach out to your friends, be on the social media, be as aggressive as you can get. I know it's difficult in these days. I have a Trump sticker on my car, and a lot of people are telling me this is dangerous. I know, but that's the country that we live in now. So I'm living it. Whatever courage you can get from wherever, be so proud to be a Trump supporter and fight on his behalf. And fight like him. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, by the way, the owners of Veramar has heard some of these stories here. It's inspiring. So instead of closing at 9 o'clock, she's going to extend it for another 20 minutes. So we want to thank Veramar for that. And so I hope that if you want to take maybe 5-minute breaks, and I would encourage you to do that, because...
No, keep going.
5 more minutes of...
Well, hang on. I haven't said anything, so listen. My goal is make sure that you tip well and, you know, buy drinks as much as you can. That's my point. Okay, so please, you can stand up and grab some drinks before they close down. All right. So if you can do it quietly, so I will leave you to the last and the best speaker of the night. So the Baroness, round of applause for her.